Marvin Starblanket was 16 when he received his first criminal charge for robbery and assault. 22 violent convictions have followed.
I hated the system, I guess. I was angry and bitter and thought if I did something violent enough, if I got aggressive enough, I'd protect myself from people.
The 42-year-old is a member of the Mistawasses First Nation, an Indigenous nation from Saskatchewan, Canada. He's now been out of prison for 2.5 years, but Starblanket isn't a free man. He's under a 5-year supervision order. This gives the Correctional Service of Canada a say over where he sleeps, this halfway house, what time he checks in, which job he pursues. Starblanket's order was imposed after his latest stint in prison for holding up a convenience store with a taser. These supervision orders are meant to address rare cases of people who pose an ongoing risk to the public. But similar provisions in the US and UK are usually reserved for sex offenders. Figures show Indigenous people, who make up about 5% of Canada's population, account for more than a third of Canadians under these orders. And previously unreported Correctional Service data reveal that the number of Indigenous people subject to strict conditions upon finishing their sentence rose 53% in the 10 years to 2024. That's more than 4 times the rate of increase for white people.
I don't want to be asking for permission forever, and I won't be.
So why is Starblanket in this situation, and where does the Canadian government come into it? Data show Indigenous people are overrepresented when it comes to breaching conditions, and they are more likely than white people to be denied full parole, even when their parole officer recommends it, parole board data shows. Some argue there is an upside to supervision, as it comes with resources such as psychological counseling and drug treatment. But if Starblanket violates his conditions or is deemed at risk of doing so, he could be sent back to prison. The combination of these orders and parole denials has deepened Indigenous people's mass incarceration under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. When he entered office in 2015, Trudeau pledged a total renewal of the relationship between Canada and Indigenous people, aiming to eliminate their overrepresentation in custody within 10 years. But as Trudeau plans to step down on March 9th, disparities have widened. Indigenous people now account for about 1/3 of federal inmates, up from 1/5 in 2015. The Justice Ministry and Prime Minister's office did not respond to requests for comment. Lawyers, advocates, and judges told Reuters the impact of poverty and intergenerational trauma cannot be ignored.
When the aura of being Indigenous, intergenerational survivor, living that tough life, at some point they start to feel like that's not an excuse. You're just a messed up person if you continue to keep being at odds with the law.
Court documents show Starblanket was abused as a child by a male relative. When he was 5, his father died by suicide in police custody. At 7, his mother, a sex worker at the time, was jailed for the manslaughter of a violent client. She was eventually pardoned, and Starblanket began shuttling between his mother and several foster homes. He went on to live a life of violent crime and substance abuse.
Well, at the time I was involved in a high-risk lifestyle of doing drugs, drinking, hanging around people that weren't healthy for me, and I made some choices that were stupid.
By 2017, Canada was funding some Indigenous-specific prison programming, and in 2022, the same year Starblanket was released and put on the supervision order, the government repealed mandatory minimum sentences for some offenses. But the reforms didn't explicitly address long-term supervision orders.
I'm really centered around family.
Starblanket initially moved in with his partner under orders not to drink or do drugs. They had a baby, Anastasia. 14 months in, Starblanket did meth and was sent to the halfway house, a facility that provides housing, meals, and services. Sticking to their conditions can be particularly hard for Indigenous people, Star Blanket's lawyer, Mike Nolan, says.
You have chronic underemployment or unemployment, and we know the two single biggest factors reducing crime are employment and housing stability. And right now, a large percentage of our Indigenous population across the country do not have either one of those factors.
Star Blanket's supervision order is up in November 2027. As much as he chafes under his restrictions, he appreciates the positives.
Being on parole and being in the halfway house, as much as it's a great support, and it's helped me a lot, there's those little small things like watching the clock, not being able to lay in with my partner Natasha and my children. It'd be more freeing because I'd be able to truly know I had my civil liberties back.
Once free, he plans to go to university to study psychology and become a voice for other Indigenous people caught up in the justice system. But with freedom comes the fear of adjusting to normal life, he says.